Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It is Friday, January 30th, 2026. If you're tuning in, you know the drill. We aren't here to just read you the headlines you've already scrolled past. We're here to get under the hood of what we call the world OS. See how the machinery was actually running yesterday? And I have to say, that background hum of the global economy, it's usually pretty quiet yesterday. It sounded like someone dropped a wrench in the gears.
It was loud, yeah. It was one of those days where the friction was, well, it was audible. You didn't have to look very hard to see the stress point.
Exactly. It felt like the engine was revving, but the wheels weren't quite catching. So let's start where we always do. If you had to look at that grinding noise at all the events of the last 24 hours and give me a single vector, what's the simplest way to summarize yesterday?
I think the vector for today is, let's call it physical constraints versus decision systems.
Physical constraints versus decision systems. Okay, that's a bit abstract. Break that down for us.
Well, think about how the last decade has generally worked. If you have enough capital, if a government or a massive company decides we are going to do X,
Then X happens.
then X happens, the decision system leads, the money flows, and the physical world it sort of yields. It accommodates the plan.
Right. You want a server farm, you write the check, you pour the concrete, and you've got a server farm.
Precisely. But what we saw yesterday across 3 different continents is the physical world slamming on the brakes. We're seeing that water, electricity, raw materials, they are no longer just passive utilities you can buy. They are acting as hard constraints. It's a head-on collision between high-speed financial expectations, the spreadsheet world, and low-speed physical reality.
The spreadsheet says grow.
And the physics say stop.
That is the friction I was feeling. We're so used to innovation being the answer to everything. We think we can code our way out of any problem, but you can't write software to generate more water in a desert.
You cannot download a liter of fresh water, no. And that tension is really what drove the entire news cycle yesterday.
Okay, let's get into the gears then. Our first deep dive is a classic example of this, energy, specifically OPEC Plus and the oil markets. I was looking at the charts this morning and it's confusing. The geopolitical news is screaming war risk, but the price chart looks like a flat line. What is actually going on there?
It's a very deceptive flat line. We call this energy stasis and volatility. So here's the structural setup. The global energy market is caught in a vice between 2 massive opposing forces.
Good.
On the one hand, you have the Middle East tensions, specifically the rhetoric coming out of Iran yesterday. That puts a huge fear premium into the market.
Which usually sends prices sky high.
It usually does. But pushing down from the other side, you have the forecast for the rest of 2026. Everyone knows there is a massive supply glut coming later this year. The non-OPEC countries are just pumping like crazy.
So traders are scared to buy because they know the market could flood in 6 months.
Exactly. So the fear of war is pushing up and the fear of a glut is pushing down, and they're just crushing the price in the middle.
Right. And yesterday's news from OPEC Plus are?
Yesterday, we got the signal that OPEC Plus is likely to continue its production halt into March. They're looking at this coming glut and saying, we cannot turn the taps back on. They're trying to defend the floor.
Here's what I don't get. If the price is stable, why does this matter? If I'm a logistics manager for FedEx or running an airline, isn't a flat price good? Stability is what we want, right?
That's the trap. It's what we call a high volatility flat range. If you zoom out to the monthly view, yeah, the price looks flat. But if you zoom in to the daily, even hourly view,
It's all over the place.
it's bouncing violently between those 2 pressures. There is no buffer.
Ah, I see. So it's like a pot of water boiling with the lid on tight. From across the room, the lid looks still. But if you put your hand on it, it's rattling like crazy.
That is the perfect analogy. And that rattling creates what we call friction heat in the economy. If you are that logistics manager, you can't actually plan. You don't know if the glut will win or if the war risk will win. So you have to hedge. You have to buy expensive insurance. You delay expansion.
So the volatility kills the planning, even if the absolute price doesn't kill the budget.
Correct. The energy OS is fundamentally unstable. It's eating up capital just to maintain position. And that lack of a supply buffer means that if one thing actually breaks, if one pipeline goes down, the move won't be gradual, it will be vertical.
Which is a perfect segue to our second deep dive, because something did break yesterday. Not a pipeline, but it shut down a massive resource node. We have to talk about copper and what happened in Chile.
This, for me, this is the story of the day. This is the water copper lock.
Okay, so just to set the stage for everyone listening, Copper is the base metal for everything we say we want to do. EVs, wind turbines, the AI grid, it's all copper. So when a major mine in Chile, the Mantoverde mine, says they're restricting production, that's usually a labor strike, right? Workers wanting better wages.
That's the standard script. But that is not what happened yesterday. The Mantoverde mine didn't stop because of a mining accident or a wage dispute. It stopped because a strike shut down the desalination plant.
The water plant.
The water plant. And because the fresh water stopped flowing, the mine had to stop digging.
That is, wow. It's almost ironic, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you're talking about extracting heavy metal from the earth, and the choke point is a water pipe.
It creates a very stark realization. We often talk about water scarcity as an environmental issue or a humanitarian issue, which it is, of course. But structurally, in 2026, water constraints are becoming the primary cause of industrial resource shortages.
Explain that mechanism. Why does a copper mine need a whole desalination plant? Can't they just, truck water in?
The scale is just too vast. Modern copper mining, especially for the lower-grade ores we have left, requires processing millions of tons of rock. That flotation process uses massive, massive amounts of water. And in Chile, in those mining regions, it's basically a desert. There is no groundwater left. So they have to pump seawater, desalinate it at the coast, and then pump it thousands of feet up into the Andes.
So they are essentially turning energy into water so they can turn rock into copper.
Precisely. And that creates a resource lock. If you want the green transition, if you want those EVs, you need copper. To get copper, you need water. To get water in these places, you need massive amounts of energy and infrastructure. If that water infrastructure fails, like it did yesterday, the green revolution physically stops.
It really hammers home that vector you started with. Physical constraints. The spreadsheet says, build more Teslas. The physics says, sorry, the water pump is off in Chile today.
And this isn't just a Chile problem. This is becoming the default state for mining globally. The easy resources are gone. What's left is locked behind a water wall.
So we have energy stuck in this volatility trap and copper locked behind a water wall. Let's move to our third deep dive, which brings this whole friction right into our backyards. We're calling this the rise of the urban OS.
Yes, and this is the shift that affects our daily lives the most, I think.
Usually when we talk about the AI race or the chip war, we're talking about nations, the U.S. versus China, the White House, Beijing. But yesterday we saw 3 different events that suggest the real power players might actually be city councils.
It sounds boring until you realize the implications. We have 3 data points: Chandler, Arizona, Clay, New York, and the city-state of Singapore.
Let's start with Chandler, because knowing Arizona, that headline was shocking. Arizona is usually the state of yes.
Yeah.
You want to build a mall?
Yes.
A golf course in the desert? Yes. A massive server farm? Usually that's a yes.
Usually. But yesterday, the Chandler city government blocked a massive AI data center project, denied it, flat out.
That is a major signal change. Why?
They just looked at the resource trade-off. The local urban OS, the planning commission, the utility board. They looked at the water consumption, the noise from the cooling fans, the strain on the grid. And then they looked at the number of jobs it would create, which for a data center is actually very few, and they just said, the math doesn't work for us.
That's fascinating. So the federal government is saying, we need AI dominance at all costs, but the local city is saying, yeah, but we're the ones who run out of water, so no.
Exactly. The decision rights are moving down the stack. Then you look at Clay, New York. Totally different story. Micron just broke ground on a huge semiconductor plant there.
So they said yes.
They did, but look at how they said yes. The city of Clay is effectively merging with the corporation. The city is now on the hook to build housing for thousands of workers, upgrade sewage, expand transit. The urban OS is absorbing the infrastructure load.
So in Arizona, the city acted as a wall. In New York, the city is acting as a foundation.
A perfect way to put it. And then you have the most advanced model, Singapore.
Singapore is always the bellwether for this kind of thing. What are they up to?
They are treating compute power like a rationed good. They're continuing to explicitly restrict data center capacity. You can't just buy land and build. You need a permit that proves your energy efficiency, your green credentials, and your economic value per watt.
Rationing, that's a wartime word.
It is, because they are treating electricity and cooling capacity as scarce national security resources. They are allocating them, not just selling them.
So if we connect these dots, Arizona, New York, Singapore, what's the big takeaway here for the world OS?
It means the era of permissionless innovation for physical infrastructure.
Right.
It's over. For 20 years, software companies could just move fast and break things. But you can't move fast and break the water main.
Right.
Data centers and chip fabs are becoming permitted resources, and local regulations on water and power are now the ultimate gatekeepers for global AI expansion.
So the bottleneck isn't the GPU production at NVIDIA. The bottleneck is the zoning meeting in Maricopa County.
100%. The geopolitical battle for AI is going to be fought in town halls.
That is a massive shift. Okay, those were our 3 deep dives. Now I want to map the rest of the board. We call this the light topics, but some of these feel pretty heavy. Let's do this rapid fire, see where the tension is on the global membrane.
Let's run through them.
First up, the money layer. The IMF released an economic outlook.
Right. On the surface, solid global growth. But in the fine print, they flagged a, quote, reevaluation of tech expectations as a major downside risk.
Which sounds like polite banker speak for the AI bubble might pop.
Or at least deflate. What they're implying is that the fast OS, finance, stock valuations, the hype is moving way too fast for the slow OS of real productivity, wages, and energy grids.
When the fast gear spins too hard against the slow gear.
You strip the teeth. The IMF is warning about strip teeth.
Got it. Next, back to energy. We mentioned the oil glut, but there's a flicker of instability in Kazakhstan, the Tengiz oil field.
This is a fragility signal. You have some operational issues at Tengiz and risks along its export pipeline.
Why does one field in Kazakhstan matter to someone listening in Chicago or Berlin?
Because it chips away at that global buffer we talked about. We're counting on that glut to keep prices down. But if Tengiz goes offline, even partially, a chunk of that glut just disappears. It makes the whole system more fragile.
Thins the ice we're all walking on. Okay, item 3, the Red Sea. We've been talking about ships rerouting around Africa for a while. What's the latest?
The latest is that it's not the latest anymore. It's just the status quo. The rerouting of ships around the Cape of Good Hope is becoming structural. Permanent.
But this isn't the detour. This is the new road.
That's it. It's a permanent rewiring of the global logistics map. The world effectively just got larger. It takes longer and costs more fuel to move everything.
Inflation by distance.
Inflation by distance, a hidden tax on everything from sneakers to semiconductors.
Right. Next, Micron again. We mentioned the groundbreaking in New York. What's the supply chain angle there?
It signifies the shift from fluid to fixed. For 30 years, supply chains were like water. They flowed to wherever labor was cheapest. China, Vietnam. But a semiconductor fab is a billion-dollar concrete bunker. Once you break ground in Clay, New York, you are married to that location for decades.
Can't just pick it up and move it next year for a better tax rate.
No. Supply chains are becoming heavy, fixed, and rooted in specific political jurisdictions.
And finally, back to Singapore. We mentioned the rationing, but there was a specific detail about green data centers.
This just reinforces the permission theme. New capacity in Singapore is strictly tethered to green energy performance. If you aren't green, you don't compute. It's proof that compute power is no longer a free-floating commodity. It's tethered to the local energy reality.
It feels like the theme of the day is tethered. Tethered to water, tethered to the grid, tethered to the city council.
And that brings us right to the synthesis.
All right, we've covered a lot of ground. Oil volatility, copper locks, city pushback, logistics rewiring. If you step back and look at the whole board for January 30th, what is the summary? What's the picture?
The overarching picture is one of physical reality checking in. I mean, we spent the last few years living in a world of abstract growth. We traded crypto, we talked about the metaverse, we hyped up AI models that exist only in the cloud. But yesterday, the feedback loops from the physical world arrived with a vengeance.
The cloud needs a ground to stand on.
And the ground is getting crowded. We are seeing this distinct tension where water, electricity, and local community tolerance are putting hard caps on that abstract growth. You can dream as big as you want, but you can only build as big as the water pipe allows.
It is a sobering thought, but a necessary one. So for the listener trying to navigate all this, what should they be watching next?
Don't just watch the stock tickers or the congressional hearings. I would advise you to watch the intersection of 3 things: water, power, and local permits.
The boring stuff.
The essential stuff. Watch the city council meetings in places like Arizona or Taiwan or Germany. That's where the real friction is happening now.
And if I can throw in a final thought, it feels like the very definition of power is changing. It used to be military might, then economic might. Now it feels like power is just, do you have the kilowatts and do you have the water?
That leads to the provocative thought I'd like to leave you with. In the coming year, the most important battles might not be between nations, not U.S. versus China and the South China Sea.
But what?
They will be between global tech companies and local city councils over access to the electric grid. When a tech giant needs more power than an entire city can provide, and the residents want to run their AC in the summer, who wins? That is the question for 2026.
The battle for the grid. It's going to be local, it's going to be messy, and we will be here to cover it. That wraps up our deep dive for Friday, January 30th. Thank you for listening and for taking the time to understand the machinery behind the headlines.
Always a pleasure. Keep watching the water levels.
We will. See you tomorrow.